Well, I mean, one of the things, again, going back, we're sort of experimenting with the game now that we're outside the trilogy. One of the ways we want to do that was in storytelling. And so it's sort of looking at how else can we tell a story besides just sort of locking you into a cinematic? I mean, games are becoming more of these sort of linear experiences where it's go down a hallway, play a cinematic, go down a hallway, play a cinematic. And we wanted to try to break free of that and have some more freedom in how we tell stories. And so two main ways we're doing that. One is sort of this embedded storytelling, where we're trying to push a lot of the story into the level that if you take the time and you look around and you really see what's in the environment, you can kind of see the stories play out for you when you understand what happened in this environment, and kind of gives you a sense of what's going on in the world at that time. The other is this idea of that, since we're doing testimony, we thought it'd be really interesting to kind of have the characters narrate their own sort of part of the puzzle. So in Baird's testimony, he gets to narrate. And so instead of having cutscene and all this stuff going on, you try to get rid of the friction of cinematics, that kind of stops you from playing the controller down moments. We didn't want to have, when you're in the heat of it and your hands are sweating and your pulse is pounding, we didn't want to have the controller down moment of play a cinematic. So what we do is we just sort of bring in this otherworldly present-day voice that's talking to, giving testimony to the Colonel to say, here's what happened, here's how it played out. And so we're able to use that to kind of keep the player engaged in the gameplay. And what's really cool is then we can use the declassification system to alter that. So then every time you say like, oh, I want to take on dark wretches, then Baird will narrate, we were shocked to find out there were dark wretches in the city, and that kind of thing. So you can actually play with the narration as well as the gameplay. And the narration is really focused on getting you through sort of the testimony that you're going through for that kind of mission, but it's not really focused on the sort of adaptive, Bastion-like, watching the character and reflecting everything. He woke up and walked to the town. Like, we don't really get into that side of it, but the notion that there are specific choices that you're going to make along the way, and the characters will comment on those choices. We learned a lot from Gears of War 1 for storytelling, and that was in terms of going back and looking at sort of like how could we make story better as we went along for 2 and 3, was that repetition is key. We always assume that people know what it was they were trying to do about the resonator. When we talked to people after Gears of War 1, you're like, so what were you doing and why were you doing it? And a lot of people couldn't really articulate that, and it spoke more to our level design and the interest they had in just gameplay, and less about them wanting to understand the story, because for a lot of them they didn't understand that they were rescuing Alpha Squad and deploying the resonator. And we found is because what we were trying to do was create these action-oriented cutscenes, and so you're under fire and you're getting your mission while you're dodging bombs, but because of that you're distracted and you're not listening to what's being told to you. And so we realized pretty early on we needed to say things more often to get that into the player and try to get characters outside of just like the commander to feed that to you. When we're trying to leverage that into judgment as well, it's like the idea of the narration is really great, because when you change locations you can actually feed in that information again and provide that little reminder of, so we were heading to the museum and and then you fight for a while, and when you finish that sequence, you go thing and like when we arrived at the museum, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to the museum, because now when you talk to people about House of Sovereigns in Gears of War 1, people have no idea what level you're talking about, because that name never registered to them, in terms of how we displayed it. So it's been really great to kind of use those lessons and provide that into the Judgment story. So we had a story director of Pixar come in, and we did this weekend workshop, one-day workshop with him, where he talked about how they do story at Pixar in terms of storyboarding, and how this idea of the controlling statement, how you do character breakdowns and what they fear and what they love, and really talked about how they work that process, and getting to see really cool behind-the-scenes video on things they had to throw away from the movies, but stuff like simple things like Woody's motivation through all 3 of the Toy Story movies were about the fear of abandonment, and so every movie was about that. And that's something when we think about now in terms of our storytelling, we think about what are the characters' motivations and how do we reinforce that and how do we use that into our storytelling. And so Matt Lunn has been giving talks at places like GDC and other industries, and they actually do a lot of other game companies, and it was just something that we've been trying to improve on storytelling since we started, and so this seemed like a natural way of getting a little bit of insight into what we consider to be the best in the industry, how they tell stories, and what can we learn from them. It's been great as we sort of look at other projects about how we can use those sort of processes to think about characters and think about arcs and motivation.